Good morning, this is Rich Nelson with Allendale. We have a special update for you guys. Today's date is July 12th of 2018. Very special day with USDA's monthly supply-demand report out here today at 11 o'clock Central Time. Now, as far as today's report overall, a little bullish, a little surprising. Good news there. And now, as far as corn, let's cover these numbers from corn, soybeans, and then wheat. And we'll discuss both U.S. as well as world numbers here on these reports briefly. As far as U.S., USDA lowered the old crop corn stocks from 2.1 billion bushels to now 2.027 billion bushels. A little surprising how they did this. They actually raised old crop exports very aggressive, 100 million bushels, even though we're slightly behind the pace where we from their June numbers. So very aggressive number as far as that goes. On the old crop side also, they raised feed use by 50 million bushels, lowered the ethanol numbers by 25. So as a whole, lowering old crop 2.1, now 2.0 billion bushels. That's positive. Also the new crop side, quite surprising there as well. Now USDA did raise production, which was completely expected. Last month was 14.04 billion bushels. This month it was raised to 14.230. Now USDA left yield unchanged at 174. No surprise with that, and that's pretty much what the trade was expected. USDA has only touched yield, in fact, less than a handful of times over the past 20 years on the July report for corn, so no surprise there. The reason why we did see this increase in production was simply a higher acreage from that June 29th acreage report. Now, despite the fact that we did raise acreage pretty good, going from 14.04 billion bushels to now 14.23. So even despite that, USDA was very aggressive in more than offsetting that with increases for the demand side here. 75 million bushels added for feed use, 50 million bushels added for new crop ethanol, corn for ethanol, and heck, new crop corn exports, 125 million bushel increase over last month. So as a whole, we're looking at now 2.0 billion bushels for old crop, new crop 1.552 billion bushels. The trade was expecting 1.7, 1.8. So good news on this corn issue, despite the fact we raised production. Now, as a small reminder, USDA has not touched yields yet. They will be touching them obviously in August. And we could see some higher numbers, which maybe cushions some of the tightness implied by this report. But certainly on the U.S. side, much better than expected. Looks like world stocks did decline 154.7 million tons last month. USDA suggested 152 million tons this month. So that's a little positive there. Net declines here we're seeing maybe some minor changes on production side, nothing that really stands out or really jumps out too much here. Now let's get into soybeans, where some of the real discussion was going to be at as far as today's report. Old crop stocks, they were revised down from 505 million bushels last month, now 465. So a decline, maybe a little surprising to some. In fact, USDA did raise domestic crush by 15 million bushels, also raise exports by 20 million bushels. So for you guys who have been concerned about USDA maybe cutting new crop exports and also old crop, that was not seen on this report. USDA actually raised old crop exports. And as a small reminder, there are still some remaining sales to China, which are still on the books right now for old crop, which potentially could still be canceled. But certainly for today's numbers, better than expected on old crop. New crop discussion, well, USDA did raise the production numbers as expected. And with these numbers, they raised the plantings a little bit here, simply reflecting the June 29th acreage report. Over on yields, they left those unchanged at 48.5 bushels per acre. Completely expected because USDA rarely touches soybean yields on the July report. Now, despite the fact we had a very minor increase in total production, USDA they had some tough cuts there as far as new crop numbers on demand. 10 million out of crush. Looks like 150 million bushels out of the, 10 million out of the total supply, my mistake. Crush was increased by 45 million bushels, and that was certainly more than offset by a 150 million bushel decline in new crop exports. So as it stands, new crop stocks went from 385 to now 580. So big numbers that are posted, not the 600s, not the 700s that some people have been concerned about, which is why the soybean market's not taking this as being very bad news. Now, as far as how USDA played around with the trade issue, because they did touch on the trade in these numbers here today. Well, they made some changes to the Chinese situation. They suggested the import numbers would drop. Instead of 103 million tons, which is what they're expecting last month, they dropped that down to 95 million tons. So in USDA's point of view, they're going to use less soybeans, simply as a matter of fact, in the country. And of course, we'll make some minor changes with Brazil to make some of those numbers work. In fact, on the Brazil side, it went from exports of 73 million tons to now 75 million tons. Bottom line from USDA's approach on soybeans, it was relatively reasonable, and nothing crazy that stands out. We'll see if China can make these actual moves to lower imports, but that's certainly an argument for a separate time. Over on wheat numbers, no big surprises there as far as old crop stocks. 1.1 million bushels simply moved to what that grain stocks report told us about the completed old crop marketing year. Now, as far as new crop, USDA did add a little bit to new crop production. They went from 1.827 billion bushels last month, now 1.881. So a little higher production than expected. On this issue, though, USDA did add both to yield as well as acres. And as far as some of these numbers on where this increase came from, as far as hard red winter wheat, that was revised up to 657 million bushels. It looks like the hard red spring crop actually a little smaller than the trade was expecting. And same thing for soft red winter wheat, was also a little smaller than the trade was expecting. So bottom line for the wheat discussion, yes, we did have higher production due to some other items on the balance sheet here, but certainly as far as the ending stocks, 946, now 985. Over on the wheat issue for the world side, we did see stocks decline from 266 million tons to now 260. Bottom line with these numbers is, yes, U.S. crop did see some increases. However, USDA cut many people on many of our competitors, which is seen as a little positive issue. So bottom line for this report, a little better than expected for both corn and wheat, maybe as expected for soybeans, but bottom line, we didn't see anything crazy from USDA on the soybean side, so that would be called a little positive. Any questions, give Ellen a call, 1-800-262-7538.